Maria had been working as a waitress at the Golden Oasis for nearly 2 years. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it paid the bills. The restaurant was known for its luxurious setting and famous customers, though Maria had always stayed out of the spotlight. Most of the time, her days blended together, serving food, refilling drinks, and dealing with the occasional difficult customer. But today was different. It was a quiet Wednesday afternoon, and Maria was working the lunch shift. She had just finished a long streak of serving at table 5, a family of 4 who had been loud and demanding. As she took a moment to catch her breath, she noticed a new customer enter the restaurant. He was a tall man, well-dressed in a dark suit, his face covered by large sunglasses. There was an air of confidence about him, the kind of confidence that comes from wealth and power. He walked in without a word, and the hostess led him to a secluded table near the back of the restaurant, away from the other customers. Maria glanced over at him. It was rare to see someone so wealthy and yet so alone. She wasn't used to dealing with such high-profile customers, but she had seen enough to know that some of them could be difficult, even demanding. She sighed softly and went back to her task. The lunch rush had picked up by the time Maria reached his table. She approached with a friendly smile. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you today?" she asked politely, trying to keep her voice steady. The man lowered his sunglasses, revealing dark, intense eyes. He looked at her for a moment before speaking. "I'll have the house special," he said in a deep, calm voice, "and a bottle of your finest wine." His tone was smooth, almost rehearsed. It was clear he was used to getting exactly what he wanted. "Of course," Maria replied, writing down the order. "Anything else?" "No, that will be all," he said, his gaze lingering on her a little longer than she was comfortable with. She turned and walked away quickly, a strange feeling settling in her chest. It wasn't the first time she'd served a wealthy man, but there was something about this one that felt different. He had a presence that was hard to ignore, and it made her feel both nervous and curious. Maria moved back into the kitchen and relayed the order to the chef. She didn't have much time to think about it because soon the restaurant was full of guests, and she was once again on her feet, taking orders and serving food. But the man with the sunglasses stayed in the back of her mind, like a small, nagging thought she couldn't shake. Around an hour later, Maria was clearing a table when she noticed the man had finished his meal. He was sitting alone, swirling the last bit of wine in his glass, lost in thought. She approached his table carefully, unsure if he was ready for his bill. "Excuse me, sir, how was your meal?" she asked, trying to keep the conversation light. He looked up at her, and for the first time, he smiled. It was a small, subtle smile, but it was enough to make Maria's heart race a little. "It was excellent, thank you," he said, his voice still calm and deep. "You're a good waitress." Maria blushed slightly at the compliment. "Thank you, sir. I'll bring your bill right away." She turned to leave, but then heard him call out, "Actually, there's something else I'd like to ask you." She paused and looked back at him. "Yes? Would you mind helping me with something?" he asked. His voice was quieter now, almost as if he was sharing a secret. "It's something personal," Maria frowned. "I'm sorry, I'm not sure He interrupted her, his tone still calm but now with an air of authority. "It's not difficult," he said, reaching into his suit pocket and pulling out a small piece of paper. "I need you to translate something for me. I'll pay you $10,000 for it." Maria's eyes widened in shock. "10,000? For something so simple?" She couldn't believe what she was hearing. It sounded too good to be true. She had heard stories about rich people offering huge sums of money for services, but this seemed unreal. She hesitated for a moment, the rational part of her mind screaming that this was a scam. But the other part, the part that was always struggling to make ends meet, thought of the money, how it could change everything. Maria had never seen that much money in her life. Could she really turn it down? The man slid the piece of paper across the table toward her. She stared at it for a second, unsure of what to do. But then the thought of her family, her bills, her dreams for a better life, pushed her to act. She took the note, careful not to touch his hand, and nodded. "I'll do it," she said, her voice trembling slightly. The man smiled again, a satisfied look in his eyes. "Good. I'll be waiting." Maria turned and walked away, still in disbelief. As she held the note in her hands, she couldn't help but wonder what she had just gotten herself into. Little did she know, that simple translation would set off a chain of events that would change her life forever. Maria's hands shook slightly as she made her way to the back of the restaurant. The small piece of paper clutched tightly in her fingers. The $10,000 still felt surreal, like a dream that could disappear at any moment. She couldn't stop thinking about the man's calm voice and the way his eyes had locked with hers when he handed her the note. His presence was like a weight pressing on her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping into something much bigger than herself. She entered the staff room, where a couple of the other waiters were talking. They looked up when she walked in, but Maria didn't pay them much attention. She needed to focus. She needed to translate the note. Sitting down at the small table in the corner, Maria unfolded the paper. The writing was in Arabic, neat and formal, but it was unfamiliar to her. She had studied a little Arabic in school, but it was nowhere near enough to make sense of something like this. She reached for her phone and opened an old translation app she'd used before. Her fingers hovered over the screen as she typed in the first few words. The app processed them, and a translation appeared. Maria's heart skipped a beat when she read the words, "Poison in your drink." For a moment, Maria froze. The words seemed to hang in the air as if mocking her. Was it a joke? It had to be. Maybe the man had hired her for some strange prank, or perhaps it was some sort of test. But the more she thought about it, the more unsettling it became. Why would anyone write something like that on a piece of paper and hand it to a stranger in a restaurant? Maria's mind raced. Poison. She couldn't take it lightly. She had seen the way the man had smiled when he handed her the note, his eyes calculating, watching her every move. He knew something, or he was part of something, and Maria couldn't afford to ignore it. She wasn't sure what was happening, but it was clear that her life was about to change, and not for the better. She quickly typed the rest of the note into the translation app. The rest of the message was simple, but just as chilling. "It's in your drink. Be careful." Maria felt a cold sweat break out on her forehead. What was she supposed to do with this information? She couldn't just go back to Mr. Zayed and ask about it. Could she? If he was involved in something dangerous? Would he harm her if she confronted him? Would he laugh it off as some sort of misunderstanding? Maria put the note down on the table and leaned back in her chair, trying to think. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It was nearing the end of her shift, but there was no way she could just go home and forget about it. If there was poison in someone's drink, if someone was in danger, she had to act. She couldn't live with the guilt if something went wrong because she hadn't done anything. She stood up and paced the small staff room, her mind spinning. Who could she tell? The restaurant manager? No, he wouldn't believe her, and it could cause a scene. The police? If there was something going on, they would probably need more than just her word. They'd want proof. Maria's thoughts were interrupted by a voice calling her name. She turned to see Jason, one of the waiters, standing in the doorway. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, concern in his voice. He had noticed how quiet she'd been since returning to the back. Maria quickly tucked the note into her pocket, not wanting to explain anything to him. She didn't know if she could trust anyone right now. She forced a smile, though it felt stiff on her face. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just a little tired," she replied. Jason raised an eyebrow but didn't press her further. "All right, well, don't forget about that table you need to check on," he said before walking away. Maria nodded, though she hadn't forgotten about the table. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, and the strange weight of the note pressed against her leg. She took a deep breath and made her way back out to the dining room, where Mr. Zayed was still sitting, leisurely finishing his wine. The thought of approaching him again made her stomach churn. What was she supposed to say? "Hey, is there poison in the drink you're about to have?" It sounded ridiculous, even in her own mind. As she approached the table, Maria's hands were clammy. She walked slowly, trying to keep her voice steady. When Mr. Zayed noticed her, he looked up, his expression unreadable. He didn't speak right away, only gave a slight nod, as if he were waiting for her to say something. I've translated the note, Maria said, her voice sounding foreign to her own ears. It says there's poison in the drink. Mr. Zayed raised an eyebrow, and for the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed his face. Was it surprise? Annoyance? Maria couldn't tell. I see, he said, his voice calm, almost too calm. And what are you going to do with that information? Maria hesitated, unsure how to answer. She couldn't just leave it there. I don't know. What does it mean? Who is this about? Mr. Zayed didn't answer right away. Instead, he slowly stood up from the table and adjusted his suit. It's nothing to worry about. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding, he said smoothly. But his tone was different now. It was colder. You did well to bring it to me. I'll take care of it. Maria stood there, staring at him. Something didn't sit right. Who was he protecting? What kind of world had she just stepped into? Before she could ask another question, Mr. Zayed reached into his pocket and handed her an envelope. Here's your payment, he said, his eyes cold now. I'll expect you to forget all about this. The $10,000 bill inside was real, but Maria's gut told her that this was only the beginning of something much bigger. Maria stood frozen for a moment, staring at the envelope in her hand. The crisp, thick paper felt heavier than it should have. She had heard the words. Mr. Zayed spoke. Forget all about this. But they didn't settle into her mind as easily as they should have. Her fingers clenched around the envelope, and her thoughts began to swirl like a storm. She glanced over at Mr. Zayed, who had already turned his back and was walking toward the exit. His posture was stiff, but his calm demeanor didn't fool her. She had seen the flicker of something in his eyes when she mentioned the note. It was fleeting, but it was there. Fear. It was as if she had said something he wasn't prepared for, something he didn't want her to know. She should have let it go. She should have taken the $10,000, thanked him, and moved on. She could have forgotten all about it. Just like he asked. It would be easy, wouldn't it? But the nagging thought that something was wrong, the nagging feeling that she had just stumbled into, something far deeper than a simple translation, wouldn't leave her. Maria stood there for a few seconds longer, watching Mr. Zayed exit the restaurant. As the door swung shut behind him, she made her decision. She wasn't going to walk away. She couldn't. Not when someone's life might be in danger. Not when she had the chance to uncover the truth. Her heart beat faster as she walked to the staff room, her hands trembling. She placed the envelope on the counter and took a deep breath. What was she supposed to do now? She didn't have all the pieces of the puzzle. She didn't know enough to make a plan. But she knew one thing. She had to follow the trail. The restaurant was quieter now, the lunchtime rush over. A few tables remained, but most of the staff were finishing their duties and getting ready to go home. Maria knew she had a limited window of time. She quickly grabbed her phone and dialed a number she hadn't thought about in years. It rang a few times before the voice on the other end answered. Maria, is everything all right? It was her cousin, Ahmed. He had been in the military for several years and now worked in private security. Maria didn't call him often, but today she needed someone who could help her make sense of what was going on. Ahmed, she whispered, glancing nervously around the empty restaurant. I need your help. Something strange is happening, and I don't know who to trust. There was a pause on the other end. What happened? Talk to me. Maria took a deep breath and quickly relayed the events from the past few hours. The note, the translation, and Mr. Zayed's strange behavior. Ahmed listened in silence, his voice becoming more serious as she spoke. Maria, he said finally, you need to be careful. If this man is as powerful as you think he is, you might be in serious danger. I don't know who he is, but anyone who drops a message like that has something to hide. And poison? That's no joke. Maria's mind raced. She knew what Ahmed was saying was true. She could feel the weight of the situation, the sinking realization that she was caught in something much darker than she could have imagined. "Do you think I should go to the police?" Maria asked, her voice shaking. "Not yet," Ahmed replied, his voice firm. "You don't have enough proof. If you go to the police now, it might alert whoever is behind this. They'll know you're involved. Stay close to Mr. Zayed for now. You need to find out more, but be smart about it. Don't let him know you're investigating. And don't go alone." Maria thought for a moment. Ahmed was right. She had no evidence of anything, just a note and a cryptic warning. She needed to dig deeper, but she needed to be careful. She had no idea how far this went, or what kind of people she was dealing with. "Thanks, Ahmed," she said softly. "I'll be careful. Call me if anything strange happens, okay?" he urged. "I will," Maria promised. "I have to go." She hung up and stood in the quiet room for a moment, her mind swirling. She had to be cautious. She couldn't make a wrong move. With the $10,000 in her pocket, it would be easy to forget all about this and just walk away. But that wasn't who she was. She had always been someone who couldn't turn a blind eye when something wasn't right. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She took it out and saw a text from Mr. Zayed. The message was short and simple. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Maria's stomach flipped. What did that mean? Was he threatening her now? Before she could respond, the restaurant manager, Nick, came into the room. He looked at her with a raised eyebrow, clearly wondering why she was still there. "Maria, you good? It's getting late, and we need to start wrapping up," he said, his tone casual but laced with curiosity. Maria quickly shoved the phone into her pocket and forced a smile. "Yeah, just finishing up," she said. "I'm good," Nick nodded but didn't leave. He lingered for a moment, eyeing her with suspicion. Maria knew she had to get out of there before he started asking more questions. "Look, I'm just going to take the rest of the night off," she said quickly. "I've got some things to do." Nick hesitated but then shrugged. "All right, if you need anything, let me know." Maria grabbed her bag and headed for the exit, the envelope still in her pocket. She stepped out into the cool evening air, the weight of the world on her shoulders. She wasn't sure what she was walking into, but there was no turning back now. She had made her choice. As she walked down the street, her thoughts were fixed on the next step. She had to find out more. She had to find out who Mr. Zayed really was, and what the note really meant. And if she wasn't careful, she might just find herself deeper in this tangled web than she could ever imagine. Maria's walk home was filled with a mix of fear and determination. Every step seemed to echo in her mind, like the pounding of a drum that couldn't be silenced. The streetlights flickered overhead as she made her way down the empty road, her thoughts churning. She knew she was in over her head, but the gravity of the situation was pulling her deeper. The more she thought about Mr. Zayed's calm, controlled demeanor, the more unsettling it became. There was something about him, something that didn't sit right. She had spent enough time around high-profile customers at the restaurant to recognize the signs of someone used to power and manipulation. But this was different. It was personal. As Maria approached her small apartment, she hesitated. She didn't want to face the quiet of her apartment, the silence that would only amplify her racing thoughts. But she knew she had to go inside. She couldn't keep walking around aimlessly. The only way to figure this out was to confront it head-on. She needed answers, and there was only one place to get them. She unlocked the door and stepped inside, dropping her bag onto the couch. The apartment was simple, with worn-out furniture and dim lighting, but it was hers. It was the place where she could think, plan, and figure out what to do next. The envelope from Mr. Zayed was still in her pocket, and she pulled it out, staring at the money inside. $10,000. It was a small fortune. But it wasn't about the money anymore. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. Maria picked it up and saw that it was a message from Ahmed. "Are you all right?" "I'm serious, Maria. Stay sharp. Don't do anything stupid. Maria sighed and typed back quickly. "I'm fine. Just trying to figure this out. I'll keep you updated." She placed the phone down and sank into the couch. Her eyes wandered to the envelope again. It was hard to focus on anything else. The words from the note lingered in her mind like a ghost. "Poison in your drink. Poison." She couldn't get past it. It wasn't just a threat. It was a message. Someone was targeting someone. The question was, who and why? Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Maria's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't expecting anyone. She stood up quickly, her breath catching in her throat. She went to the door and peered through the peephole, only to find no one there. The hallway was empty. She opened the door cautiously, stepping into the hallway. At the foot of the door was a small package, wrapped in plain brown paper. There was no note, no indication of who had left it. Maria's stomach twisted. Her first instinct was to ignore it, but curiosity got the best of her. She bent down and picked it up, her hands trembling. Inside the package there was another envelope. This one was smaller than the first, and the handwriting on it was slanted, hurried. Maria's heart raced as she carefully opened it. Inside there was a single piece of paper. She unfolded it, and the words on it were clear. "You're getting too close. Stay out of this, or the consequences will be severe." The message was direct. The threat was unmistakable. She didn't know who it was from, but there was no denying that someone was watching her. Someone who didn't want her digging into Mr. Zayed's business. Maria's mind raced. This wasn't just about a strange note anymore. This was serious. Someone was trying to intimidate her. They were sending her a clear warning. But who? And why? Was it Mr. Zayed? Or was it someone else entirely? Her fingers tightened around the paper, and she felt the familiar stir of determination rise within her. She wasn't going to back down now. The stakes were higher than she could have imagined, but she couldn't stop herself. She had to keep going. She had to find out what was really happening. She quickly grabbed her phone and texted Ahmed again. "Someone just left a warning at my door. It's not over." "I'm not backing down." Her phone buzzed almost immediately. "Maria, this is too dangerous. Please, listen to me. They're already making moves to stop you. You don't know who you're dealing with." Maria stared at the message, her mind racing. She knew Ahmed was right. This was dangerous. She didn't know who she was up against. But one thing was clear. Someone was willing to go to extreme lengths to keep her from uncovering the truth. But Maria wasn't going to back down. The mystery surrounding Mr. Zayed and the message about poison in the drink, it was all too much to ignore. She had started this, and now she couldn't stop. There were too many questions, too many unknowns. She took a deep breath and paced the room. What should she do next? The messages, the warning, they only made her more determined to uncover the truth. But she couldn't do it alone. She needed help. A plan began to form in her mind. If she couldn't confront Mr. Zayed directly, she would have to find another way. She had to get closer to him, figure out who his allies were, and learn what was really going on. But she couldn't do it from her apartment, locked away in fear. She had to go back to the restaurant. She had to stay close to him, keep an eye on what he did. Maybe there was something she missed. A clue, a person, a detail that could lead her to the answers she needed. Maria wasn't sure how far she was willing to go, but one thing was certain. She wasn't going to let anyone intimidate her into silence. The truth was out there, and she was going to find it. With a final glance at the warning letter, Maria grabbed her coat, stuffed the envelope back into her pocket, and headed out the door. The night was far from over. Maria's breath came in shallow bursts as she walked briskly down the darkened street. Her fingers clenched tightly around the envelope in her pocket, the $10,000 burning a hole in her jacket like a dangerous secret she wasn't sure how to carry. The warning message had only fueled her determination. Whoever was behind this, whether it was Mr. Zayed, someone else, or an even darker figure in the shadows, wasn't going to intimidate her into silence. She had to know more. The puzzle was too complicated, the stakes too high to walk away now. And yet, her mind kept returning to that note. Poison in your drink. Who was supposed to drink the poison? Was it meant for someone in the restaurant? Someone Mr. Zayed was trying to protect? Or was it part of a larger, more sinister plot that had nothing to do with her? She reached the restaurant, the golden lights of the exterior casting long shadows on the street. The once welcoming facade now seemed foreboding. The place where she had spent countless hours serving food and smiling politely at strangers had become the epicenter of something much darker than she had ever imagined. The door swung open as Maria entered. The familiar clink of glass and hum of conversation filled the air. It was as though nothing had changed, but everything felt different. She was no longer just a waitress. She was now a player in something bigger, a web she had unknowingly stepped into. The weight of it all pressed down on her, and for a split second she wondered if she had made a mistake by coming back. But then she pushed the thought aside. She couldn't afford to second-guess herself. She had to stay focused. She made her way to the back of the restaurant, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of Mr. Zayed. He wasn't there, but she knew he had to be close. She had to get closer to him, to his world. She had to see who he was meeting, who his associates were. She couldn't act too rashly, but she couldn't wait forever either. Time was running out. Maria spotted the manager, Nick, in the kitchen. He was talking to a few of the kitchen staff, but he turned to see her as she approached. His eyebrows furrowed in curiosity. "Maria, what's up? You came back in so late." "Just forgot something," Maria replied quickly, forcing a smile. "I'll be gone soon." Nick didn't seem entirely convinced, but he didn't press her. "All right, just don't make a habit of it. We've got to close up soon." He turned back to the kitchen, clearly more concerned with the restaurant's operations than with her odd behavior. Maria glanced at the clock. It was late, but the night shift had just started. Most of the evening crowd had left, and only a few patrons remained. She decided to make her move. She couldn't wait around any longer for an opportunity to present itself. She needed to create her own opportunity. She walked toward the farthest end of the dining area, past the empty tables. As she neared the VIP section, a thought struck her. If she wanted to get close to Mr. Zayed, maybe she could start by understanding the restaurant's layout better. She had never paid much attention to where he sat or who he was with. But now she realized that the restaurant's discreet corners, the private rooms, and the hidden alcoves might hold more than just rich customers enjoying their meals. Maria stopped just outside the VIP section and leaned against the wall, pretending to adjust her uniform. She scanned the room, her eyes moving from one table to the next. There was a corner booth where she had seen Mr. Zayed sitting before, but tonight it was empty. She could only assume that he had left already, unless he had moved to another area of the restaurant. Her eyes caught sight of something unexpected. A small group of men gathered around a table at the far end. They were speaking in hushed voices, but Maria could hear snippets of their conversation. One of them, a large man in a dark suit, gestured toward a notebook on the table. "It's all set for tonight, then?" he asked in a low voice. The others nodded, and the man leaned in closer. "Good. We don't want any surprises. He'll be here soon. We'll deal with him then." Maria's stomach tightened. The man they were talking about. Could it be Mr. Zayed? Her mind raced. She had no way of knowing for sure, but it seemed likely. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Something was about to go down. Something big. And she had stumbled right into the middle of it. She needed to know more. But there was no way she could walk up and ask them outright what they were planning. No, she would have to wait. She couldn't be too obvious. Maria slipped into the kitchen, pretending to grab a few extra supplies. Her heart pounded as she formulated her next step. She needed to find a way to get closer to this group. She needed to hear more. There had to be a way to make herself invisible, to blend in and gather information without arousing suspicion. As she grabbed a clean towel and walked back into the dining area, she noticed a familiar figure, one of the waitstaff. It was Lena, a fellow server who had worked with Maria for a while. She waved, and Maria motioned for her to join her. "What's going on?" Lena asked, her voice low. You've been acting weird all night." Maria didn't have time for small talk, but she couldn't ignore Lena's question. She glanced around to make sure no one else was listening before she leaned in close. "Something's happening. I don't know what yet, but I think Mr. Zayed is involved." Lena raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued but skeptical. "Are you sure about this? I mean, the guy seems off, but this is getting a little crazy." Maria looked her square in the eye. "We need to figure out what's going on. I can't do this alone." Lena hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "All right, I'm in." For the first time that night, Maria felt a small sense of relief. She wasn't alone in this anymore. Whatever was happening, they were in it together now, and together they were going to uncover the truth. Maria didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, the words "poison in your drink" flashed behind her eyelids. The message, the warning, and the strange meeting in the restaurant all swirled together in her mind like a whirlwind she couldn't escape. She had stepped into something far more dangerous than she had imagined, and now there was no going back. By morning, she knew she had to take a bigger risk. The more she thought about the small group of men in the restaurant, the more certain she became that they were connected to Mr. Zayed in some way. They weren't just talking business. They were making plans, and they didn't want anyone to overhear. And the threat they had made to her was real. She couldn't just sit idly by and wait for something bad to happen. Lena had agreed to help, but Maria had no idea what they were getting into. She had to find a way to get more information to understand what was truly happening. She wasn't sure where to start, but she knew one thing. She had to confront Mr. Zayed. She had to get close to him, find out who his allies were, and see if she could figure out what he was planning. It was still early in the day when Maria showed up at the restaurant. The quiet before the lunch rush gave her a chance to think and observe. The staff was busy preparing, and she moved through the back corridors of the restaurant with purpose, trying to keep her movements natural. She couldn't afford to look like she was snooping. The last thing she needed was to attract attention. As she entered the kitchen, she caught sight of Nick, the manager. His expression softened when he saw her, but there was a new wariness in his eyes. It was clear that something was off about her behavior, but he said nothing. "You're back early," he said, sounding more casual than he probably felt. "Need anything?" Maria gave him a quick smile, her thoughts racing. "Just checking in. Is Mr. Zayed here?" Nick raised an eyebrow. "Zayed? Why would you ask about him?" "Oh, just wondering if he's having lunch here today," Maria said, trying to sound nonchalant. "He was in last night, and I thought he might want the same thing." Nick didn't seem convinced, but he didn't press further. "He comes and goes," he muttered. "You'll see him if he's here. Otherwise, he's probably meeting someone outside." Maria's stomach tightened. She hadn't seen Mr. Zayed in the restaurant this morning, and if he wasn't meeting anyone here, that meant he was probably in a more private location, somewhere far out of her reach. But that didn't stop her from trying. She couldn't give up now. The puzzle pieces were starting to fit together, but they were still incomplete. If she was going to get any answers, she needed to take matters into her own hands. She quickly excused herself from the kitchen and walked to the storage room at the back of the building, the farthest point from the main dining area. It was empty, the smell of cleaning supplies and food storage hanging heavy in the air. She needed a plan, and the more she thought about it, the clearer it became. She would follow Mr. Zayed. She would find out where he went when he wasn't at the restaurant. She couldn't risk confronting him directly. Not yet. She needed information first. If she could figure out who he was meeting and what he was involved in, she might have a chance to stop whatever was happening before it was too late. The storage room door creaked open, and Lena stepped inside. Her face was tense, and she looked around quickly to make sure no one was following her. "I've been thinking," Lena said, lowering her voice. "You're right. There's something off about Zayed. You should be careful." Maria nodded. "I know. I need to find out where he goes when he leaves here. He's hiding something. I can feel it." Lena crossed her arms, clearly concerned. Are you sure you want to go this far? What if this gets dangerous? Maria took a deep breath. I can't ignore it. Someone's in danger, and I don't know who it is. I have to keep going. But I need your help. Lena hesitated, but after a moment she nodded. All right, I'll help you. But we need to be smart about this. We can't get caught. Maria felt a surge of gratitude. She wasn't alone anymore, and that made all the difference. They would figure this out together. The next few hours were a blur of preparation. Lena had a car and a steady hand behind the wheel. They decided to take turns watching the restaurant's front and back exits, hoping to catch sight of Mr. Zayed. The goal was simple: follow him without being seen. By late afternoon, their patience paid off. They saw a sleek black car pull up to the back entrance of the restaurant, and Mr. Zayed stepped out, adjusting his jacket as he walked briskly toward a waiting man who was standing near a parked vehicle. He's here, Lena whispered, glancing at Maria. Are you ready? Maria nodded. Her heart raced, but she pushed the fear down. She had no choice. This was the only way to get answers. The two women followed discreetly, keeping their distance as they trailed behind Zayed and the man. The alleyways they walked through were dark, and the sound of their footsteps echoed off the walls. The black car drove slowly ahead, and Zayed disappeared into a building. Maria's heart skipped a beat. Lena turned to her. This is it. What now? Maria's throat tightened. We wait. We need to find out what they're up to. As they stood in the shadows, Maria's mind raced. She wasn't sure what they would find, but one thing was certain. She was close, closer than ever to the truth. The building loomed ahead, an old, abandoned warehouse tucked away in an industrial district on the edge of town. The sun had set hours ago, and the darkened streets offered the perfect cover for what Maria and Lena were about to do. Their footsteps echoed in the silence of the alleyway, muffled only by the distant hum of city traffic. Maria's heart beat faster with every step. This was it, the moment she had been building toward for days. She had followed Mr. Zayed and his associate to this place, but now the questions were multiplying faster than she could keep up with. What was really happening here? Why had Zayed been involved with such shady characters? Who was he protecting? And why had she been caught up in all of this? As they neared the warehouse's entrance, Maria caught sight of a small, rusty door at the back of the building, slightly ajar. She motioned to Lena to stay low, and they both crouched down, careful to avoid the beam of light from the street lamp overhead. From their vantage point, they could see figures moving in and out of the warehouse, carrying boxes and speaking in low tones. There was a sense of urgency in their movements. Maria's stomach twisted. Whatever was going on here, it wasn't just business. It was something far more dangerous. Lena's voice broke through Maria's thoughts. What do we do now? Maria didn't respond immediately. She scanned the area, trying to make sense of the scene. They couldn't just rush in without knowing what was inside. If Zayed was involved in something criminal, then there was a good chance they'd be walking right into the lion's den. But if they stayed out here any longer, they might miss their chance to uncover the truth. I think we need to get inside, Maria finally said. We need to see what's going on. Lena hesitated. Are you sure about this? We don't know what's in there. What if they… We'll be fine, Maria interrupted. We've come this far. We can't back down now. Lena nodded, though her expression showed she wasn't entirely convinced. The two of them moved swiftly toward the warehouse, staying low and out of sight. They reached the door and paused, listening for any sounds from inside. The soft murmur of voices echoed faintly. Maria motioned for Lena to follow her as she pushed the door open just enough to slip inside. The warehouse was dimly lit, the air thick with dust and the smell of old wood. They crept through the shadows, their footsteps light, barely making a sound. Maria's eyes darted around, scanning for any sign of Zayed or his associates. It wasn't long before they spotted him. Mr. Zayed stood near the center of the room, talking to the same man Maria had seen earlier, his associate. The two men were in deep conversation, their voices too low for Maria to make out the words, but there was something tense in the air. Maria's breath hitched as she realized they weren't alone. Around them, several other men stood, all dressed in dark clothing, and all appeared to be part of whatever operation was taking place here. Maria's mind raced. This was bigger than she had thought. What was Zayed involved in? And how did all of this connect to the threat she had received? Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from across the room. Maria flinched, her heart leaping into her throat. The men in the warehouse turned toward the noise, their attention diverted for just a moment. This was their chance. Maria signaled for Lena to move, and the two of them quickly slipped behind a stack of crates, hoping to remain unnoticed. They crouched low, waiting for the men to go back to their conversation. Maria's head was spinning with questions, but she couldn't afford to get caught now. She needed to hear more, to understand what was going on. As the men continued to talk, Maria could catch snippets of their conversation. It was difficult to make out, but one phrase stood out. "The package is ready." Maria's pulse quickened. Package? What were they talking about? Was it the poison? Was someone planning to use it soon? She needed to know more, but there was no way to get closer without risking being seen. Just then, another voice interrupted the conversation. A new figure entered the warehouse, a tall man in a suit, walking briskly toward Zayed. Maria's stomach dropped as she recognized him. It was the man from the hotel, the one who had handed her the note. Her thoughts raced. What was he doing here? What was his connection to all of this? As the man approached Zayed, their conversation seemed to intensify. The tension in the room was palpable. The man in the suit handed Zayed a small package, almost identical to the one Maria had received earlier. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, and as Zayed took it from him, the look on his face was unreadable. Maria's heart pounded in her chest. This was it. This was what they had been preparing for. Whatever was inside that package, it was important. She needed to know what it was. She turned to Lena, her eyes wide with urgency. "We have to get out of here. We can't stay much longer." Lena nodded, her face pale. The two women slowly began to retreat, their movements slow and calculated. But just as they reached the door, a voice rang out behind them. "Who's there?" Maria froze. The man in the suit had spotted them. He was moving toward them, his face now twisted into an expression of suspicion. Without thinking, Maria grabbed Lena's arm and yanked her toward the door. The two women bolted for the exit, the sound of footsteps pounding behind them. They weren't going to make it out without a confrontation. Maria's heart raced as she heard the men calling to each other, the chase beginning in earnest. The warehouse was a maze of crates and boxes, but they had no time to hide. Suddenly, Maria heard the unmistakable sound of gunfire, loud, sharp, and echoing through the empty building. She turned to Lena, fear in her eyes. "They're not playing around anymore," Maria whispered. And for the first time since this all began, Maria realized just how deep she had gotten. This was no longer just about a note or a strange man in a suit. This was real, and it was about to get a whole lot more dangerous.